Hey everybody, welcome back to Contest Prep University. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Adam Atkinson. Today we're going to talk about stage ready. Interestingly, part of our actual tagline, it's almost like AI is part of our production. Stage ready versus stage wrecked. And I love this contrast, Adam, because I have wrecked myself for contests. Great learning lessons when you can tangibly see you not looking at your best when that was your entire intent. So I think it's best to start there. Like we all have an idea of what stage ready looks like, and especially if you are as good at self-delusion as I am, you go into it with the intent of winning. Like this is going to be the best ever. Whatever I'm moving toward at this stage of my career, I'm going to accomplish it this time. And I know for a fact, just 30 years of working with clients, that's what fuels us. That hope, that appeal, the entire process of how do you focus on something 24/7 for months and never misstep, and keep driving toward that goal. It's the obvious intent of making sure that you are going to actualize all of your dreams this time out. But sometimes we push too hard, sometimes we push too fast, sometimes we use the wrong methodology, and it ends up being a nightmare. So, out of all of the ways that we can wreck ourselves when it's obviously not our goal, what do you think comes into play? What are the ways that competitors do that with probably just a little too much zeal?
I think the first thing that comes to mind that we see the most often is people don't budget enough time to be stage ready. And, I've seen it happen time and time again. People still think 12 to 16 weeks is the norm for, a high level prep. And, then they get upset when their cardio's high and their food's extremely low at the end. And it's like, well, what else do you want me to do? We can't change your genetics as much as we can change your height, as we've always liked to say. And then you put that in narrower time frame. Also, the lack of reverse dieting adherence or off-season adherence, I think can be another reason. If someone gets too heavy in the off-season, they may need to diet down for a bit, do a longer diet break, restore some of that metabolic capacity, and then dive back in again. And it just can be pretty miserable if you're not taking the time to recover in the off season, getting too heavy in the off season. And yeah, definitely you really have to treat the sport like a dimmer switch. You really can't be in it 100% all the time. I think we see a few people who are, or maybe we think they are, because how Instagram portrays it. But you do need some balance, likely, to keep some strut in your step for your next prep. And I think that's the other thing too, are you following the protocol? But what's your intensity like? You may be doing the cardio, but you're complaining and, walking super slow. Maybe you're lifting 2 pound weights versus, 20-pound weights. All these things can make a big difference.
Well, unsurprisingly, your first suggestion was the first on my list as well, and that is the speed of which you're trying to diet. And I almost came to a conclusion this year as I'm getting clients ready for the upcoming season, that I was going to reinstitute a little bit of a tougher coaching perspective. Just to say, no, you cannot do that. Like it is impossible for you to get to this place in this amount of time. You just can't do that. Instead of soft pedaling and saying, well, if it would cost us a little extra work and you probably won't be quite as lean and you probably won't be at your best, I try to acquiesce a little bit to just civility and letting clients, make the decision themselves with some input. And yet again, self-delusion. Sometimes people don't get the subtlety of those hints, and they just think, "Oh, there's a chance." Joe says there's a chance, so let's do it. I'm okay, and I'm willing to do the harder work. And through experience, you just know it's not going to happen. You cannot look your best in too short of an amount of time. I'll give you one quick anecdote. I think it was just the first couple years that I had turned pro, and so all this extra pressure made me want to do more. Like I knew I was going to have to reach a condition I had not yet attained, so I was just pushing with too much cardio, too few calories. I would crash, I would burn. The first couple times out, I just looked like I had regressed by a decade. I look at those photos from my first couple pro shows, and it just absolutely looks like I lost 20 pounds of muscle. And I was working too hard, pushing too far, instead of, as you said, giving yourself the time and maybe even some breaks to more healthily, maintain muscle along the way. So my second would be actually choosing the right method. Uh, One of those early times, I guess it was even when I was an amateur, I had tried keto a couple times, a couple different applications of it. It was in a popular cycle at that time. And very similarly, I just lost tons of size. I just absolutely was emaciated. So how much do you range in suggesting to your clients, the kind of method to use? If somebody comes to you and says, Adam, I really want to do it this way. I want 10 times the normal protein amount and zero carbs, or I want to be pure keto, 90% fat, or I want to do carnivore, I want this or that. Do you let clients say, sure, I'll guide you through that as best I can? Or do you say, maybe we need to pull over in this direction?
There's going to be pros and cons to some certain things. The big thing I'm seeing with carnivores, lack of eating the microbiome of the gut, so that can be uh, put clients in a pretty negative spot. So I think it depends on um, how detrimental it might be to the client to do that. Sometimes I have people with they definitely need to cut out gluten or maybe they do need some lower carb dieting. That's fine if we have like a really specific reason on why they may want to do that. But I typically like to work within, we're going to do this the best way, because we don't want to leave anything on the table in a contest prep. So, right now I have a client who's getting ready for a show and she doesn't have a gallbladder. She kind of is showing symptoms of the runaway metabolism. And, I do like to increase fats to stop that a little bit, but we know we can't increase them as much. So, it's you have to always customize, right? So you can't just do it the way you like to do it all the time. That's the art of coaching. But within most cases, I really try to explain to clients maybe why we won't do that, or why they shouldn't do that.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation, especially as I've been watching a few recent nutrition. I don't want to say experts because it's not their primary field, but some influencers, some academics who are being interviewed on popular podcasts, and they're kind of stuck on that insulin model from the 1990s. So they're big proponents of keto, and even as they try to explain it in a way that research might support, they get very, very lost in the end result of just emaciation, so to speak, the inability to fuel hard training, lean body mass, retention, and so forth. But on my side of the fence, I keep thinking, well, I mean, there are good tools we borrow. We obviously manage carbs, and as you said, sometimes you do want to increase fat. It's when you take it to those extremes and you're just unwilling to look at the benefit of using anything as a proper tool. Some people's metabolic genetics, phenotypes, do tend to allow them to go into one area a little bit differently. So I have really tried to give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit more. And you mentioned carnivore, one that I particularly think, um, at least by application, the way people perceive it, is better than pure keto. Allows for more protein, allows for some starch as long as it's not from grain and so forth. So it all comes down to how you're going to do that. But I think, tying yourself to a specific method and just giving yourself no way to modify is a way to wreck your physique and just not be where you want. You mentioned body weight going in. Maybe you just have too much body fat to lose in a certain amount of time. I think that kind of ties into my third topic note, which would be the distance. How long can you stay lean? How long can you stay under your metabolic set point? Can you diet from a spring to a summer to a fall to a late fall or winter show and still look your best now having maybe been dieting for 12 or 14 months? I know we've talked about this in the past, but what do you think for the average person is a good length of time to even expect to be able to hold your best physique?
I think like as far as like getting to the stage, yeah, probably like 20 weeks would be a good medial average. Some people are going to fall into that 24, some may be a little bit faster. And I'm going to say that's with the more advanced divisions, bikini and up, fit model below as we kind of see the criteria shake up. But genetics always have to be in the consideration. I had an inquiry last night where I honestly think she'll be ready in 8 weeks, but I said, let's do 12 because, I'm a new coach to you. Let's establish communication, learning how to use my spreadsheets as kind of part of that learning curve versus just rushing it, 8 to 9 weeks in.
And I'm assuming she's in pretty good condition, and
Super good
yeah,
condition. I
you're probably interpreting she has a good metabolism, is not going to have any problems. So let's say now, Adam, you're getting her ready for a spring show, and she's been at 6, 7, 8% body fat, and now it's June, July, August, and she's still there, and she says, "Hey, man, how about we do November?" Do you think she could sustain that? Do you think she can maintain her lean body mass even by just bringing calories up to maintenance? Do you always have to come out above metabolic set points for a distance of an off season, however you may define that, to be your best, or do you see anybody who can kind of maintain that?
She'll probably be better on the spectrum than most because, I figured this girl was tracking pretty heavily to be here, and she's like, I'm not really doing anything at all. Now, there's still some questions there, how much is she actually eating? Um, I think there's a good chance, but I think it's always best to bank on a non-stressful state. So going above that metabolic set point for at least a short amount of time until you just don't want to grind the systemic stress over and over and over again. And I think we see it eventually with competitors, for instance, you see people who win Olympias and then they stop winning Olympias, so, but you also see their competition record and they're competing forever. And you wonder how much better they might do if they took some time off, and worked on fine tuning that criteria. So, you see that with amateurs too, they're at every national show and they start falling back. First they're top five, then they're top 10, then they're, in the last call out because there's not been improvement. But you also sometimes see the physique degrade. So I really think it's always good to bank on the side of caution for a lot of reasons. The other thing I'll throw out there is if someone competes in the spring and then they feel like they need to do the fall, what are we really teaching them? Are we just allowing them to do what they want? And sometimes you have to bend that direction no matter how much you disagree to keep the client happy. But it's always nice to teach along the way and say you will be better if you do the hard thing by skipping this and then doing the next. Because sometimes it's just easier for people to prep all the time until it's not.
Yeah, it's important, especially just by the pure definition of our title for this podcast, being stage ready versus stage wrecked, that this is peaking. The whole nomenclature of what we're discussing. You could look at it in any performance sport, and it makes more sense. For some reason, to us, it seems like, well, just looking better, being leaner, like that's okay. Once I'm there and I've done that work, it's way easier to maintain that. So therefore, I'll be fine. And you look at somebody like a UFC fighter, who will only fight a couple times a year at most, and they prefer, especially at a certain level when they're defending titles, like once a year, because it's grueling. They are peaking. They're going to a fight camp to get their bodies in the most specific condition possible, for a performance reason, which lends itself to a certain aesthetic. Ultimately, they're dieting and getting lean like us to make weight classes. And I even saw in the NFL playoffs this weekend somebody who had just won a game on a Saturday, and was just extolling the fact that now they have an 8-day work week for the next game. And he said that extra day of recovery is going to be awesome to have. They didn't have to play Sunday to Sunday, it was Saturday to Sunday. And in a microcosm of what we're talking about, similarly, an extra month, an extra 6 months, an extra year that you give yourself that off season to really build and recover, both metabolically and anabolically is very important. So keeping that phrase in mind that you are literally peaking, and there's just a process managing all of those variables to a very specific point in time where you are your best. To try to maintain that across an entire calendar year is just never going to be your best. As many people who try, they manage it well. They monitor their calories perfectly, their macro distribution. They're taking care to be above maintenance, have some higher calorie anabolic days. You're still under that set point, which means by definition, for a good portion of the year, you are way more catabolic than normal. And it just erodes a certain look of fullness, and you're just gonna look back and say, yeah, that just wasn't my best.
Hmm. Absolutely. I think too, if someone's not lean enough, they could definitely do the spring to fall and they'll be, even at the cost of some muscle degradation, they would show up and be better and probably place higher just based on being able to achieve lower body fat. So in some cases, it can work out well. And I've done that with clients to keep them to chase the carrot to get a little bit leaner. These are usually more major weight loss cases. But you really want to check the mentality before you go from spring to fall, because even though it may seem good then, it may not be good, once you're there now.
Well, I'll give you one more little example, then I want to ask you kind of a broader question. Uh, two people that I have seen just this week. Well, one is a client of mine who, we won a handful of pro titles in different divisions across the board. He's one of the most gifted, leanest competitors I've ever seen in my life. Just ungodly physique and ability to get lean. Um, he went into an off season, came back. I think it may have been even 18 or so months now, and he's working with me to get ready for this season. And I was very happy to see, just enough body fat to where I was like, wow, you did have an off season. I was almost afraid he was so tied to being that lean that he wouldn't allow himself the caloric needs and time to get up there. He's not overweight by any means, but it's like, wow, we had an off season. That's great. Uh, a female competitor who is in our Contest Prep University D1 club group, she has been, posting photos and showing us her progress and asking very specific questions. How do you think I'm doing? I'm this far away from my last contest. I have this much more distance to go. Here are my stats. Here are my photos. Am I staying lean enough, but am I gaining enough? I mean, she's asking those very specific questions we're talking about, and getting some feedback from us and some peers in the group. And to me, that's such a great attitude to have. I'm really trying to walk that line between having a great off season that's very productive, not letting body fat get too high, but making sure I'm giving myself that time. So, maybe that's a better way for our viewers and listeners to look at it. But just as a final swipe at this, is there anything else that you see that we haven't talked about, Adam, that really does risk just shitting the bed, wrecking your physique instead of being as perfectly ready as you wanted to be?
Well, everything that we've talked about's been not permanent, but I think the overuse of anabolics to be, you know, to make up for maybe bad peaking, so using a high amount of androgens for fullness for women that might cause like permanent changes. Not only will that, wreck you, you may look great on stage, but the aftermath can be pretty painful on that, having some facial or other changes that you're stuck with for life because tried to get a little bit fuller by taking a larger amount of androgens for a show. At what point does that is that worth it? Is the juice worth the squeeze? So is it prize money? Is it an Olympia title? I think that's something clients have to ask themselves. I have a client right now who, she swore up and down. She's like, I don't want to do the PED protocols that I used to do. And they were probably the heaviest PED protocols I've ever seen for a female. So we've got a lot of things at baseline, and she's very underwhelmed with where her physique is at. And, now she's staring down well, I think I want to do this again. I'm like, well, when you hired me, you told me that's not what you want to do. So now she's really at a crossroads. And I'm like, you can hope in one hand that the side effects aren't going to happen. But if you do what you've always done, it's just going to happen.
So the alternative being, in contrast to that, Adam, if somebody, bikini, fit model, whatever division figure a woman is looking at doing, even in, men's physique, you're describing that as kind of a shortcut hack again. Like you didn't give yourself enough time. You're not looking at the long term of this, and you're just trying to get there faster. So you're using a higher amount and maybe array of PEDs. Is the alternative just taking your time and being patient and using less and monitoring some of those androgenic effects?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And she tried to go natural for a while, but when we did her blood work, I'm like, there's literally nothing happening for hormone production right now. So, we even lost some muscle probably during that time. It was hard to tell because her body fat was high, but now that we've stripped some down, she doesn't look like she used to.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate this. I know our audience does as well. So, those of you listening, thanks again. And we'll catch you in the Contest Prep University D1 Club. Those of you who are members there, we can chat about this a little bit more. But, Adam, we'll see you next time in Contest Prep University.